All right. So I've left this YouTube channel inactive for quite a while, and I think I found myself something that I might do on it over time. So my plan from now on with the YouTube channel is I'm going to basically be doing like short demonstrations slash tutorials of just kind of tips, tricks, and techniques that I have. Because I get a lot of questions over time, how I do my things. It's like, oh, this must take, a long time to make or stuff like that. And generally, my replies come to, no, it's, an under a minute thing, and people are wondering how and why. Well, I figure I might as well answer those questions through some demonstrations and some tips and tricks and tutorials. So for today, I'm gonna start off with I'm gonna draw kind of like a dragon head, but mostly I'm gonna focus on creation of brushes, which is one of the most powerful tools you have in your arsenal as a digital artist. Now, I am working on a very outdated Photoshop version. I'm using CS3 because pretty much ever past that point, I've yet to find a single thing that the newer versions have that the older one doesn't. Okay, technically they do use up they do recognize the full potential of a new computer, but generally for comic work, this is more than enough help for illustration work as well. So I'm gonna just make a new layer, and I'm gonna make some basic work now. Generally, people may have noticed that I do a lot of work with my simple square brush. Now, it is a very simple brush. It's basic matrix. Its basic sample is literally just a square, and then I drop the spacing to 1%. Now, dropping the spacing to 1% means that square is getting repeated a very intensely large number of times, so that it's going to be hard on your system sometimes. However, it does produce a much more quality stroke than something like you would usually see with the default being 5. Still, both are usable, so adjust that. Usually on brushes, adjust that to your own need. So I'm gonna make just a kind of a basic dragon head. For those of you who are interested in how can you learn how to draw a dragon, well, it's very simple. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody who's ever kind of mastered drawing dragons was generally interested in drawing animals. So just look up some lizards, alligators, combine things, see what interests you, and see how you could combine it into. That's pretty much what the whole art of creating fantasy beasts is it's a big old patch job. Now, the reason why I use a square brush is it enables me to kind of look at the big picture, assemble basic shapes without going too much into details. And that's important. Like with painting and with drawing, you kind of want to back off from the whole thing. You don't want to get yourself lost in the minutiae. You want to zoom in and start drawing it like that. Even though I do sometimes do that, but that's because I'm a dumbass. Now, another thing about this whole YouTube thing that I'm going to be doing is I want to make it clear to everybody that all of these techniques and all of these methods are pointers. They're little tips and tricks. They're gonna work for you as much as you can make them work for you. It comes down to that. It always comes down to that. Now, these techniques were something that I developed over my career, over the time of my career, and they're generally products of somebody who was self-taught in art. So take everything that I do and everything that I say with a grain of salt. If you truly want to, learn drawing, learn painting, my opinion is always, get yourself multiple teachers. Lord knows YouTube is full of drawing tutorials. Go through them, give them a look, see, and see who basically is showing you the things that you want to learn. Uh, I'm not gonna be. I'm not gonna focus on teaching you how to draw. Learning how to draw is, it's a grind. It's not a. There are no real shortcuts to it. Sure, somebody's lessons and somebody's tips and tricks may get you. They may get you moving forward faster. But at the end of the day, there's no going around the grind. There's no going around mastering the muscle memory, mastering, your ability to perceive form, your ability to capture the essence of your characters, to capture their gesture, to capture their movement, emotions, whatever you want. That's that only comes through practice. And this is coming from somebody who's speaking. I wasn't to I wasn't born talented. I was just somebody who was poor enough, and paper and pens were very cheap. So my parents gave me that and kept motivating me to hey, why don't you try drawing? Here, let me teach you how to draw a tank and stuff like that. And it was a game that my mom used to play when I was a kid. Basically, she would show me like basic. She would like draw a basic tank made of the simplest of forms, and then she would be like, you draw three of these, and then you draw this, then you draw this, and then you draw this, and that was how I started getting into drawing, because once I drew it, they would encourage me. It's like, keep going on, and you know, I got interested into it, and kept practicing over time. It wasn't always my top of my priorities. I was a teenager like anybody else at some point, and you kind of lose your track with that. However, there's always time to kind of get back into it. Now, like I said, the primary thing here is gonna be I'm just gonna basically build up a basic shape for this dragon thing that I'm drawing. And once I'm kind of satisfied with it, I will blend its forms, and then we're going to focus on building some brushes. I'm going to try and get you to understand the basic logic behind brushes, because very often I'm asked by people, it's like, do you have your brushes to download somewhere? And yes, I do. They're put them for free on DeviantArt, but they don't matter unless you know what you're doing with them. Because my brushes are very function based, they're made with a point. Now, when I say they're made with a point, I mean there's a lot of methods of work that I use in Photoshop that enable me to use brushes that were created in order to work hand in hand with those said methods. Sometimes, sometimes I want to use a brush that's gonna work hand in hand with a bevel emboss filter. Sometimes I want to use a brush that works well with stroke filter. Sometimes, I'm gonna use a brush that's gonna be there just for dropping shadows, for simple stuff. So at the end of it all, I have to have a clear idea what I want my brush to do, which is why I picked today's topic to be a dragon, just because it enables me to build a few very effective brushes and get you to start understanding, the the basics of it, or the fundamentals. I will do multiple videos on brushes and just kind of how to apply them, and also multiple videos on your standard what's it called, filters, and how you can make those work for you. Because back in the early days when I started doing Photoshop, like filters were very much frowned upon by the the more highbrow people of the digital art community. I never understood that. To me, a filter is nothing but a tool in your toolbox. If you're not going to use it, then yeah, good for you. But it's there for a reason. And for me, those reasons were always simple. I wanted to expedite my workflow. I wanted to make myself work faster while maintaining the quality. It goes hand in hand with the fact that I'm a comic artist, which means I have to draw a lot of fucking pages. Um, Pardon my French, or in this case, Croatian. But yeah, I had to draw a lot of comic pages to, you know, to get the job done. You got to make a lot of comic pages, a lot of comic panels, a lot of drawings, because every panel is in a way a drawing of its own. So your productivity has to be fast. It has to you got to have a high output. Also, pardon my Tourette here. Turns out it wasn't allergies. Got a bit of a Tourette's that tends to act up whenever I am either overly stressed or overly inspired. These days, I am way too overly inspired. I'm working on several books at the same time, between Sunstone, my secret DC project, and some stuff that I'm developing, and that Visual Volume 2. I'm kind of falling apart from overload of inspiration. So, I'm a bit of a mess. So, don't uh, so that you're not confused about that. Anyways, let's say I am generally, happy with this. Now, I have this thing. Let's say I want to go with some crazy details in this thing. Well, it's time to make some brushes. So I'm gonna open a new file. Now, in newer Photoshops, brushes can go up to some really large sizes. But in the older one, it's limited to 2000 by 2000. Now, I've never had need for anything larger than that, so it really doesn't matter to me. However, if you're using, anything anything past CS3, you'll see that you can make, much larger brushes. Now, the brush I'm looking for here is, well, I'm looking for several brushes because I kind of have an idea of how I want to structure the dragon scales. There's the basic covering scales. There's like a softer skin that's on his neck. There's the larger horn scales, and then there's some plating and some stuff that I maybe want to do in combination with bevel emboss, cast shadow, and filters like that. Now, the way you create brushes in Photoshop is you're basically doing doing kind of an opacity map. Every brush is consisted when being created is consisted out of a black and white. Now, the black parts are gonna be what your brush registers. They are the fundamentals of your brush. The darker it is, the more intense that brush is. When it's white, it's not gonna use color on that region. So let's say this is our brush. This is our basic matrix from which every brush is compiled. Like for instance, for this square brush, basic matrix is a square. But let's say I have this brush that I made for like bushes and stuff for shrubbery. The basic matrix is this one image. This is the one image that you're working with, and this is the one image that is going to get repeated. Now, in Photoshop, there are limitations with creating brushes. Newer programs such as Clip Studio will enable you to do something that I've wanted Photoshop to have for a long while, and that's gonna be the moment when I actually switch to a newer Photoshop is when they implement something like that. And that is the ability to load up several different matrices. So let's say, I want a matrix that has one of these, I want a matrix that has like one of these, and I want one of these, and I can combine them all in the same brush. In current state of Photoshop, it's not an option. So you play the cards you got, not the cards you want. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create ourselves some scale brushes. First things first, I'm gonna create myself a cool horn brush. Now, with that in mind, I know that if you ever saw like horns of a goat or something like that, like or a ram, you'll notice that they're kind of made from these like repeating patterns, like these scaly parts, like I don't even know the word for it, but it's best advice, look up some references to understand the element that's repeating itself. It's not always the same element, like it's not always going to look the same. In fact, you don't want it to look the same, but you get the idea. There's a repetition of this very specific looking thing, and that's what I'm after when I'm creating a brush. I want to capture the heart of that element that's repeating itself. Oh, shit. Like I said, a brush is a black and white thing. when you're creating a matrix. Also, one of the things I'm using is my blending brush. Now, my blending brush, I posted that on DeviantArt a long time ago. It's something that I did that I made like 15 years ago or so, back in the early days of Photoshop. And basically, it's a smudge brush with activated scattering. I usually use 10 count and scatter to around 14%. I use other dynamics activated, or in the newer versions of Photoshop, it's called transfer. It's the same thing, so you could just click it on. And under spacing, I click it off completely, because if I didn't, it's extremely heavy. Like even with this, like it's super hard to on your system. However, you uncheck spacing, no problem. Why? Lord knows. I figured that out in the early days. I don't know why it's still the case, but it is what it is. It works. To quote a brilliant man, it just works. Now, we're gonna we're gonna build ourselves a quick brush, and now let's say, um, now here, the most important thing here is I know what I'm after with this brush. you know, I'm after to create that very specific, oh, no, sorry, not flow, opacity. I'm after to recreate that very specific element that patterns itself along the whole length of the horn. And to do that, basically, I will create one segment of it. Now, you know, you can imagine seeing this thing on a dragon's horn, or a goat horn, or a ram's horn, and it's gonna kind of this whole segment here is going to be repeating itself, just kind of following. Now, uh, when creating a brush, some smart things to keep in mind is always try and keep your edges of the brush to kind of sink into whites. So basically this, don't leave rough edges where you don't want them. By that I mean, I want this brush to kind of fade into nothing, uh, because this is going to be a depth brush. This is going to be a brush that I can use with a bevel emboss filter. And whatever is black on that kind of a brush, when used on a bevel layer, it's going to gain more depth. Now, for an actual demonstration of that, I'm just going to now go and edit, define brush preset. I'm not going to name the brush because I don't care. You're free to do so on yours. Now, I'm going to activate shape dynamics, and now I'm going to give it some energy. I'm going to, first of all, give it some, set it up so that I have a smaller minimum, so that, as I press it, it goes from, just a second. I wasn't finished, so I'm going to have to redo that. But yeah, so now, as it is now, it's just kind of repeating it, but not really doing anything with it. Like, I can push, I can pull it, but it's not really, it doesn't look right. Now, in order for these shapes to follow my stroke, I need to set angle jitter to direction. When you see that, now you can see the whole thing is following my stroke. Now, what I want to do is get some spacing between it, so that so that it has, room, so that each and every one of these segments gets, its own spot in the sunlight. Now, also what I want to do is I don't want it to just constantly look, the same thing. So what I want to do is I want to flip, which one am I flipping? There we go. Oh, wow. I have completely messed up the matrix. This is why the whole thing is flipping off center so much. Yeah, this is a very badly constructed brush. So let me just undo a bunch of these things. Step backward. There we go. Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. So right now you've seen me make a mistake, and it's an important lesson in the brush making. You want your brush to be set symmetrically on the basic paper that you're using, on the basic file. And there are ways to fix that. Of course, you can free transform it. Warp tool is very useful for this. So you want it to be generally centered, because once you activate those flips, edit define brush preset again. Once you activate those flips, let me see now for this one, shape dynamics. Yeah, once you activate those flips, you don't want it to wander off way too much for you, like, because otherwise you're going to lose control over the whole thing. All right, now let me just separate it. No, I don't want scattering. I do want other dynamics. All right. Now, going back to the dragon itself, what I'm going to do is, see, there's different ways where in which I could use this brush now. I could use a very light color and just kind of, do this. But this isn't really what I'm after. In fact, let's say I'm really happy with the underlying color. I'm not terribly happy with it, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to make a new layer, new layer. I'm going to go with, where's my layers window? Window, layers. Layer style. Bevel and emboss. All right. I'm going to leave it as is now, but on default settings, just for a first demonstration. Now, let's say I just want to add pure depth to this thing. I don't want to add no color. I just want depth. I want depth information from this brush here. Like, I want these more intense parts to pop out, and that's all I'm interested. I don't want the color itself of the stroke. Let's say I want that. So I'm going to first of all now set up some bevel embossing. I'm going to set my light angle. Light angle is very important because that kind of sets up how the whole thing is going to be illuminated. And you're going to see it even more now when I increase the depth itself. Let's say I want to go to the maximum depth. I want to set the size to 1, just so that it just limits itself to the details of the brush itself. Now, this is the illuminated part of the beveling is going to be what you want it to be. Like, you can have it, you can leave it on white. I usually like to tint it a bit lower. And under shading, you can pretty much do anything you want. One of the things this is useful for is understanding whether or not your thing, the thing that you're drawing has subsurface scattering. That being whether or not it's an organic matter, and or whether or not it's a matter through which light can slightly penetrate, which will give you kind of a colorized element to your shaded areas. Now let's say I want something a little bit. There we go. I think it's gonna be fine. Now, you can increase the amount of it. Okay. Okay, so now, like I said, going back to the big question, do I want the color of the brush to be here, or do I just want its depth information from the bevel? Well, if I just want the depth information, I can just remove fill. And then it's just a transparent thing. And, I can do with it whatever I want. I can warp it to shape if I need to. However, let's say I like, what the color information does to it, but I still want some of the below stuff, so I can just kind of, pick a happy medium for it. And with that, I'm going to start kind of building up some horn material. Let's say I don't like how far apart the segments are, so I want it, a little bit closer. It's not the best horn brush, but it's here just as a demonstration. Now, okay, let's say I'm happy now with, my horn parts. I'm gonna actually add him some backscaling as well. Now it's all looking very weird because as you zoom in and out, it kind of has its own way of translating it. But let's say we merge it down, so it's gonna be like this. So this is by no means enough for us. Let's say we really want, we want these scales to kind of carry an impact. So edit, undo. So what we're gonna do is we're also gonna add another thing to these effects. We're gonna add a drop shadow. Um, Now with drop shadow, you can keep it on the black for your multiply, or you can just, kind of find your own thing that works. And now we can give it a try again. Edit, undo. Now, another thing that we can do to increase the impact of this whole layer is we can literally duplicate it. Now, we merge it down, and now we merge it down. And now we're starting to get a way more impactful effect of everything that we've been building up. Now, let's say I'm done with my big scaly parts. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna again create a new, not, I'm gonna create a new layer, but I'm also gonna create a new file. Well, in this case, considering I don't need this one anymore, I'm just gonna clear it. And now I'm gonna build myself a scale brush. Now, thing about a scale brush is a small advice I've learned, or kind of figured out over time was don't make it overly complicated. Don't try doing too many scales. Just kind of make it into this asymmetrical thing, and you'll understand why soon. Also, keep in mind about your depth information, as in, you know, things that are black are gonna give you more depth on a bevel layer than things that are lighter, and things that are white will give you none. All right. So let's say I'm happy with this brush. So what I'm gonna do is edit, define brush preset. All right. Now, next step, shape dynamics. With shape dynamics, for this one, considering I want just like a covering of scales, I don't really want this thing to look patterned. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make some size jitter so that the brush itself, the matrix itself, is changing its sizes from smaller to larger. I'm gonna make minimum to 27%. This is basically the diameter of how much of a difference it's gonna be, like where it's gonna be. Is it gonna be moving from 0 point brush, small as possible, to the maximum that you're using, that you have set up at that point, or you're gonna go like, I don't want that small repetition anywhere, so I'm gonna put it to something manageable. Now I'm gonna give it some spacing. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna have flip X and Y. I'm gonna give it angle jitter, and in fact I might actually give it some scattering and reduce the count because I don't want it to over. The whole purpose of this is to create a rather organic scattering and an organic looking brush. Another thing that I can do is I can put other dynamics for pressure control, and I can actually use color dynamics. Now with color dynamics, what I can achieve is I can set, you set on your Photoshop, see how you have two colors. What color dynamics does is it picks those two colors and it kind of shifts between them. If you just have it like this, If you just have the foreground to background jitter, it's just going to keep flipping between these two. However, since it's an organic thing and I want more little, nuances and hues, I can add some hue, saturation, and brightness jitter to that. And that's going to create a brush that I need. Now, layers, I'm going to set it again to layer style, bevel, and emboss. Probably should have saved the style itself, but since it's very simple to recreate, I can just, why did you flip? What are you doing? Anyways, I'm gonna leave the settings as they are for now until I make some control strokes. Now, this brush is a bit of a failure. Why? Well, it doesn't really look like scales. It looks more like pebbles. However, that's not to say it's not gonna be useful, because I can simply make a soft transition. I can use this brush as my transitioning brush between patterns that are more, rock-like and more intensely scaled, to patterns that are more like skin. And that's one of the big lessons with brushes, is you'll often find yourself using brushes that you didn't intend for one thing. You're gonna find them actually quite useful for that thing. Now, let's go and make ourselves the final brush. Edit, clear. I want a white background. Clear. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a very soft patch. Very soft patch. And what I want to do with that patch is I'm just gonna start kind of carving into it with extra, like basically erasing back to white. This is gonna give me nice subtle nuanced whiteness. What I really want to keep in mind though is I want every single corner of this square to be absolutely white. Like I don't want any grayness to those, because this thing is gonna keep repeating itself and I need it to be as transitionless as I can make it. Now, with a lot of effort, you can make it pretty transitionless. So, now I'm gonna add it some, little interesting bumps. I can set to multiply. These light modes are something that I'm going to cover in a later video, but multiply, basically, as long as you have that set under your brush, it's just going to keep adding darkness to your drawing with it. And if it's multiplying while using a brush with colors, that's not, great. It's going to keep adding darkness, but it's going to keep adding color and darkness at the same time. So now let's say I am happy with this. I can actually do some very simple contrasts and layers, not layers, levels, adjustment levels. Just to kind of make things pop a little. All right, let's say this is the brush I need. Edit, define brush preset. All right, now going back to our dragon here. I will just duplicate this layer just so that I don't have to deal with creating it again. And now, with the brush that we made, okay, I'm gonna set it up, shape dynamics, flip X, flip Y. There we go. Other. Now, for this one, I just want the depth information from it, so I'm not going to use any color dynamics for it. So for this specific bevel layer, I'm just going to remove fill completely. And from there on, I can work with pretty much any color I want, because it doesn't matter, because all I'm getting is the depth info. Now, as you can see, the result is basically skin. Now, we can, of course, increase the effectiveness of this by fiddling with the elements of the bevel layer, which is something we will very much do. But as you can see, it is pretty effective. Now, one of the things that I don't like about this is the fact that I'm adding way too much value information for larger masses, but it's easily dealt with because, like I said, this is just a texturing part, so I can easily just draw over that in the end, you know. In fact, if I'm even a little bit careful, I don't even have to be really careful, I can actually control these shapes to actually, you know, serve my piece. In fact, layer, duplicate layer. And yeah, this is the thing that I was talking about. When you actually zoom out, Photoshop doesn't really know how to translate it properly. So just be aware of that. It's not gonna affect your piece at all, but it does seem shocking once it happens. And now I'm gonna actually add another layer, duplicate layer. I'm gonna just clean it up, edit clear. I have the whole image selected so that I can just clear whatever is on that duplicated layer. And then I can just use a very soft brush to kind of give myself some, you know, wrinkles and stuff that I need for just basic forms. It's a very easy thing to kind of use. Now, the thing I don't like about this bevel setup is that I have white as my highlight. It's something that I am not a fan of ever, so I'm gonna do it in this. And now let me see, layer. Do I want some drop shadow maybe on some of this? Which one is my scales? This one. Nah. Layer, merge. No, actually I'm gonna just merge visible. Actually, before that, I'm gonna increase my shading values. All right, now we have some basic, you know, we have our scale work done. And now, when this is all set up, now you can actually have fun with the piece, because now it's all about new layer, set the, no, not from background, layer, new layer, setting it to multiply, and this is where you start building shapes, forms, ambient occlusion, stuff like that. Because once the layer itself is set to multiply, basically this is where you add your proper shading. You can then add another layer, set it to color, set it to overlay, set it to soft light, hard light, add tinting. There's a whole lot of stuff that you're going to be able to do with the clever use of layers. It's going to keep your work fast. It's going to keep you effective. It's going to keep you being capable of doing some very, you know, visually intense stuff at a very fast pace. Now, like I said, all of these tutorials that I'm going to be making are, they're not the word of God. Don't take them as such. These are just methods I'm using, and I get asked about them often. So I figured, I'm going to share them anyways because my methods don't make me, who I am. Just, you know, it's just, uh, it's just the way I do things. However, if you find these things useful, by all means, have fun with them. Have fun with them, use them professionally. I don't give a shit. I mean, I don't give a poop. Because one day I might actually monetize my YouTube, and then all of my Croatian cursing it's gonna come to bite me in the butt. But yeah, I'm not gonna be doing this in any crazy amount of details. This is just basically your simple tutorial that that's serving as your first step of insight to some of the options that you can use to create some, you know, useful brushes that are gonna do the things that you need them to do. That are gonna be there to expedite your workflow. And we can go new layer again. I sometimes will use overlay, sometimes soft light, sometimes hard light, sometimes linear light, depending on what I need to do. um, I use overlay often when I need to kind of, you know, make some elements of the form pop. So I just kind of do some highlighting uh, while at the same time slightly tinting so that I give it a little bit of color. Like in this case, I'm giving it a bit of a yellowness while at the same time making these paler parts pop out. Um, then let's say layer, new layer. I want, I don't know, let me see what soft light does for us. Because I'm guessing, there's a blue sky overhead this dragon. And I really do want that thing to kind of reflect on, on anything that's, on any part of his form that's kind of facing upwards. So I'm just gonna, give it a bit of a bluish tint. Soft light is very effective for this. Overlay is as well. Um, uh, Also, there's some things that you can do to help yourself preserve the shadow elements of this, but they're not really gonna do that much for you. Plus, let's be honest, no brush is your final and only solution. Once you've actually kind of built up your forms, it's inevitable that you're gonna have to go into them sometimes and just kind of make things other dynamics, set it to pen pressure. Sometimes you're gonna have to touch it up and finish it so, on your own. And one other important thing, all of these methods are not they're not your painter methods. Okay, you're not gonna be any crazy digital painter with them. This is for fast work. This is for work of a comic artist, a concept artist, an illustrator on a deadline. So these are kind of secret weapons to use when Yeah, when you gotta meet a deadline, when you gotta get shit done, and time is of the essence. This is when these techniques are a shine. Now, don't get me wrong, like any technique ever, uh, with enough practice, you can make it work for you in any kind of line of work. Hell, you can make excellent paintings while using all of these filters and bevels and embosses and everything. But you really have to practice your way to that one, because at the end of the day, no brushes are gonna save you. If you don't have the knowledge of volumes of shapes, forms, values, light, shadow, color, all of those things are crucial. Like that's gonna make your painting, not the brush. However, this is for people who are, already pursuing, you know, their own level of mastery, and can use some tips and tricks to kind of try out and see if they fit their arsenal, because it's not gonna fit everybody's workflow. At the end of the day, we all have a different way of solving visual problems, and in order to do that, you gotta have to pick your own way of approaching it. Now I'm gonna do some linear light. First of all, I'm gonna give it a pupil. Gonna give it one of. I'm gonna do a blue linear light, bluish, very light bluish linear light with low opacity, and then I'm gonna just draw in some reflected environment, because that's one of the things with when you see an eye and the shine in it, it's technically not a shine. It's first of all a reflection of the environment, and then it reflects the highest illuminated point, which is sun or whatever light source it is. Also, one of the most important advices for drawing characters convincingly, to drawing good characters, to designing good monsters, hell, to even drawing people, gums. Gums are your biggest friend. Like, they are the anchor point of teeth. They make the things work. So never forget gums. Anytime you show gums on a monster, anytime you show gums on a character, you're already one step closer to making them seem believable. Multiply. Now, like I said, these brushes, they're not going to be your savior. These methods are a supplement, They're way better. They're way better people to teach you how to draw on YouTube. My problem with trying to do that is I'm not at that stage anymore, and I have been self-taught, so I don't really have the methods to transfer my knowledge. Hell, I'm currently in a step of evolving my work to a next level myself, so I'm kind of at that stage of learning where I'm kind of feeling the force, if you know what I mean. It's like it's whatever I'm doing, it becomes very hard to explain. However, methods are easy to explain. Still, considering I'm more than likely gonna make more than a couple of videos about this stuff, who knows? Maybe by the end of it, I'll figure out the way of actually, you know, teaching you more than just Photoshop tricks. And even so, I cannot stress this enough. YouTube is loaded with people with good tutorials, with good ways of transferring their knowledge to you. Utilize it. You know, when I was a kid getting started, I didn't have that. Today, you can learn to draw much faster than it was ever possible. You don't need the education for it. You don't need the schools for it. Like I said, nobody taught me this stuff. This was me figuring things out on my own because, you know, I really didn't have anybody around me to give me pointers. But nowadays, there's stuff everywhere. So my advice, don't just look at my work. For fuck's sakes, don't just look at my work. Because you can go all the way to the top with being self-taught, you know, but you can get there faster if you pick up the knowledge from a bunch of people along the way. But I can't stress this strongly enough. Pick up the knowledge, but don't try to pick up styles. Styles are a whole different thing, and I will cover that in an upcoming video. There is a dangerous allure to styles. All right. Also, Liquify Filter is one of the best things ever. It enables you to quickly redefine forms. And this is one of those things that newer versions of Photoshop have a great advantage, because the Liquify filter in the old Photoshop is a little bit limited. It's 600 pixels max, while the new Photoshops you can do like 6,000 pixels. It's freaking ridiculous. So you have absolute control. But yeah, here we go. Sloppy Dragon, you know, it can be much better, but for what I need for it to be, it's fine. Hope this helps out some of you who are interested in, utilizing some of my methods. Uh, Feel free to, comment or whatever, and feel free to ask if there's anything you're interested specifically, maybe for me to cover in one of the future videos. And thanks for watching.